Hello again, class. Let's get into week 4, even though we are in week 3 and you have some lecture quizzes and a discussion due. Week 4 contains a lot of the content in this course, and so I want to open it early. What's in week 4 is due, as you can see, on November 17th. And so you'll have about a week and a half to go through. And when you see how much is here, you'll understand why I'm wanting to open it early. You have the textbook topics in chapters 3, 8, and 14, 2 lecture quizzes from the lectures for chapter 11 and 12. There is your first formal speech, the demonstration speech, which includes gathering an audience of at least 4 people and submitting your outline and references, the bibliography for the demonstration speech. In addition, you'll be asked to evaluate 2 demonstration speeches, and our discussion for the week will be you evaluating your classmates' one-item speeches. So there's a lot to do in addition to the midterm exam. We are halfway through at the end of week 4, and so there is a midterm examination worth 100 points and a demonstration speech also worth 100 points. So week 4 is critical to your success in this class, and therefore I'm opening it early during the middle of week 3. So let's take a look at that midterm exam, because I know that's one of the things that causes a little bit of apprehension. So the midterm exam is over 9 textbook chapters. As I said, the midterm and final exams are basically totally over the textbook material, not so much the lectures. The lectures will be similar and some of the material will cross over, but you want to concentrate on basically the textbook material, the outlines, the slide presentations for each chapter. And so it's basically over chapters 1, 5, 6 in week 1, 4, 7, and 9 in week 2, and 10, 12, and 13 in week 3. So it's worth 100 points. It consists of 50 questions, 25 true, false, and 25 multiple choice, and you will have 1 hour, 60 minutes to complete the test in one setting. So you want to get out ahead of that and begin reviewing those chapters as they're listed. In addition, the midterm exam will not be open until Sunday night. The remainder of week 4 will be open here on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. But in addition to the midterm exam, on Sunday night, I will provide a cursory study guide that will let you know the question topics on about half of the test, about 25 of those 50 questions. So that should help you a little bit. But even though it's open book and even though there is a little bit of a study guide, don't take it lightly. Be prepared to take this exam. It's important to your grade and your success in this course. So, also in week 4, we're going to have your first formal speech, the demonstration speech. The required length is 5 to 7 minutes. You'll want to gather at least 4 audience members and show them, turn the camera towards them before you begin your speech. And then when you begin your speech, let me remind you that you'll be standing. You'll want to step back, treat your camera as though it is a member of the audience. And so those types of things you want to think about, and also remember what we said about good lighting. Some of you have done a really good job so far on your introduction speeches and the one-item speeches as far as lighting, but you want to be backlit. I have lights out to the side and one in the back, as well as the room light above. You just don't want your video to be dark. It's one of those things that would become a linguistic barrier and cause people to become distracted. But for this demonstration speech, it's your first formal speech in which you demonstrate a process or procedure or talent or skill, such as baking a cake, performing CPR, changing a tire, something that just becomes your own, an idea that comes to you. So utilize what you've learned in the lecture slides to deliver the speech. But if you need some help, there are 3 links contained here. Links from Write Out Loud, My Speech Class, Speech Mastery, and those give you some ideas. But if you just Google demonstration speech topics, there are hundreds of ideas. And ultimately, you'll perform well when the best idea actually comes from you. What are you interested in? What are you good at? What have you demonstrated before, possibly in your job or in another class? What would you like to talk about? That will be your best topic. So you're going to assemble an audience of at least 4 persons. More is even better. You're going to show the audience prior to the speech. And one of the things you want to do, in addition to looking at some of the lectures, is there is a rubric for every speech assignment. And so you want to follow that, because this will tell you how you are going to be evaluated. And so take a look at the rubric, and you'll notice that overall quality 10% includes the bibliography. So when you get to the bibliography assignment to submit it, it says there are 0 points, but it is part of your overall speech grade. When you go to overall quality, it's effort, commitment, attire, and your support, bibliography, and references. So you should be able to do a good job with all of the resources that you've been given for the demonstration speech. Don't be afraid of it. We recognize that you're a novice public speaker many times, but if you follow the directions, choose a good topic, do your research, and present well, I think you'll have fun doing this demonstration speech. So also in week 4, let's take a look at the 2 lectures. Lecture 11 on listening. And so the overview, we're going to talk about why is listening an important skill. Let's face it, it's always part of good relationship theory, and anything that you can do to become a good listener helps those relationships. We're going to talk about what are the different types of listening, what can prevent effective listening, how can you help your audience to listen more effectively, and as an audience member, how can you practice listening more effectively? So people love to talk and they love to be heard. So relationships are more valued when we value what another person is saying. So if we're just pretending to be listening, but we're waiting for our turn to speak, we may be hearing, but we're not listening. And so a true part of conversation is actually listening. But think about it. Listening increases knowledge, whether you're listening to a speech or a lecture. It increases knowledge of another person, helping you in that relationship. And so you process and use that information. Sometimes it opens professional opportunities, offers opportunities for friendship, building better relationships with friends, coworkers, and families. And listening fulfills your communicative responsibility. So communication is a transactional process. A sender sends a message, and the listener or the receiver receives the message or ultimately chooses to accept or reject it. And so what can we do to help our audience listen? The audience member is an active participant and not a passive vessel. And so we should do everything we can to strike a responsive chord so that they will not just be hearing, but they'll be listening, processing, understanding. Listening is a conscious act. And so we have to do something as a communicator to encourage the listener or the receiver to accept and process the message. So hearing is different from listening. Hearing is simply the physiological process of receiving sound, and listening is the act of paying attention, processing it, assigning meaning. All those things involve attending, understanding, responding, and if all those things are engaged, then there's a good chance that the message will be remembered. Although one of the interesting parts of communication theory is that nonverbal communication, which is later on in this lecture, sometimes accounts for 80% of what the listener actually uses to process the message. So we have to remember this. It's not so much what I say as the messenger, it's what you hear as the receiver. If you're not processing, you're not listening, you're not hearing, it doesn't really matter what I say. And put yourself in the messenger spot. It's not what you say, it's what the listener, the receiver, the audience hears. So receiving is the same as hearing. It's the physiological process. Attending is choosing which sound to pay attention to. Understanding is applying meaning to that, comprehending it, and this is where communication really begins. And then, if you can strike a responsive chord, you can get a verbal response, a written response, nonverbal response, such as visual cues of excitement, attentiveness, then you know that you're striking some sort of a responsive chord. Silence means no perceptible response, but remembering is ultimately what we want. That's the final stage for the listener to retain what they've heard. So you want to go through the different types of listening, and then we talk about the linguistic barriers, the barriers to effective communication. So what can prevent when something breaks communication down or interferes? We call it noise. When you've ever seen a television signal get lost and all you get is all of that fuzziness, that's called video noise. But there's all kinds of internal or external distractions or barriers to receiving a message. And so there are physiological barriers, bodily conditions, internally. So internal noise might consist of you simply being sleepy or hungry or thirsty. There may be psychological barriers internally, such as stress or worry, that cause you to be distracted from hearing the message. External noise, obviously, some of those you can imagine. There may be a lawnmower outside. There may be someone talking, and so those are environmental barriers. And linguistic barriers are when the verbal and nonverbal message used by the speaker are unfamiliar or misunderstood. So if someone is introduced and they come out on stage and they immediately lie down on the stage and begin talking, what's going to happen? You're going to be wondering, why are they lying down? If they get to the point and explain that, well, then the verbal and nonverbal message match. But if they just simply lie down, making it more difficult to be heard, and the audience is spending their time, what is this person doing lying down on the stage? Well, there's distraction, and so the nonverbal message does not match the verbal message. So make sure you look at all of these things on how you can help your audience listen more effectively. They'll help you in your speech. And let's look at lecture 12, evaluating speeches. We're not going to spend a lot of time on this, but how might evaluations be conducted? What's important about them? What should you consider? Who will be evaluating in this class? It's your classmates, and how can you evaluate a speech? Let's set a basis for this in just agreeing that evaluation is a good thing. It's a learning tool. How do we know what was effective? How do we not? I heard a St. Louis comedian, Kathleen Madigan, talk about touring 250 dates a year over 30 years and not really getting tired of it. And someone asked her, we know that you use some of your material over and over again. And she said, yeah, I have to. It would be too stressful to continually come up with new material. And she said, when I think about these people that say they're coming up with all new material, where are they practicing this material? In their basement? Well, you need an audience to tell you, to give you feedback on what's funny in comedy. And she says, so when I know what works, there are audiences that come expecting some of those bits. And so I want to recycle them in some way and give them what they want. But then she said, of course, they're also expecting new material. But it's that feedback, that evaluation that lets her know what comedic communication is effective. So evaluation hones your critical thinking skills. It helps you take on an active role in your life, and it supports clear and successful reasoning. So let's go back to the module for week 4. And we've gone through the 2 lectures, and that's why this is really important. We've gone through the midterm exam. The discussion, you'll be asked to evaluate classmates' one-item speeches. And so what you're going to do, you're going to post your one-item speech. Even though it's been graded, you will still want to post it. And so you can find that in files over to the left. You might find it on your own computer files. And then you are just simply going to hit reply and attach your video just like you did before. So when you attach your video, that's only one part of it. Then you're going to watch someone else's, and you are going to leave comments on at least one classmate's speech. If you do both of those things, I can then award you the full 10 points to that discussion assignment here in week 4. And remember all of these things: the midterm exam, the demonstration speech, the discussion that we just talked about. All of these things and the 2 lecture quizzes, they're due on Sunday, November 17th. There's one more assignment here we want to take a look at. You will be asked to evaluate 2 demonstration speeches. Those speeches are linked in the assignment. It's a 20-point assignment. And so overall in week 4, there are 250 points. So you want to get out ahead of it, and that's why we're opening it early. One of these speeches that is linked here in the evaluation is a very good speech, and the other is not. And it gives you some guidelines on evaluation. And so you are going to submit your evaluation of each speech, and you can be awarded up to 20 points. So in summary, week 4 is the most important week left. You want to begin studying for the midterm exam, since I will allow you to see what chapters will be covered in the midterm exam, but the midterm exam will not be open until late Sunday night. You'll want to read chapters 3, 8, 14, 3, 8, and 14, and also the 2 lectures that we just covered on listening and evaluating speeches, the evaluating 2 demonstration speeches, and I would do that before you actually submit your demonstration speech, which includes the audience and the outline and references. And then finally, the discussion for week 4 is we're asking you to evaluate classmates' one-item speeches. So that's week 4, very important. It isn't due until the 17th. And remember that you still have week 3 assignments due by this Sunday, the 10th. But if you have any questions, feel free to contact me by text, phone, email, or Canvas mail. I look forward to seeing your next work.